Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Symbiosis 5 weekend sessions. It is our pleasure to welcome back Arlene Custock, who will be guiding us through a demonstration on landscape painting. Over to you, Arlene.
Thanks for being here, everybody. I appreciate it. I sincerely do. I know you're taking time out of your afternoon and it's a busy Saturday, so thanks for joining. I have been painting landscapes for just about a year and a half, so not very long. And I've learned a lot in the process, particularly in the last 9 months. I've been in symbiosis as I've had to really focus on um, producing art. And I learned a lot of what not to do, I think, almost more than what to do. So I have decent instincts, but I didn't understand the reasons behind um, why things looked better or looked off. Even until recently, I've learned a lot in the last month as I started preparing for this presentation and as my projects came into focus. And I came across a particular book that I will reference pretty heavily. A lot of the material that I'm going to share came out of this book. It's called Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, and I'll share it in the end. I'll share some of my favorite paints and books and things like that. Um, I've also written everything out in text form on my slides so that people can feel free to take a screenshot and use that information to help them in the future as they want to start landscape painting. It's not exhaustive. There are a lot of topics I just couldn't fit in. I felt like I was trying to write a book almost as I was going through this. So the beginning is going to be somewhat technical. I tried to put it into my language and my voice a little bit so that well, I hope it's not too boring. Um, so I will get right into my slide presentation and we'll go from there. I don't mind being interrupted if you guys have questions along the way, and we don't have 100 people here either, so you can feel free to stay unmuted if you'd like to. Um, so let me see if I can figure out the technology and not mess it up again. All right. So you can see my screen, I'm assuming.
Yes, we can.
All right, let's get started then. So what will we learn today? I want to talk about value, light, dark, and in between, aerial perspective, which is transitions in value and color, atmosphere, why are those mountains misty blue? Sky colors, is the sky really blue? Clouds, aren't they just white and gray? Composition, how do we catch and keep the attention of our viewer? And then I'll go through my process, share some of the tips and tricks and recommendations that I have. And then if there are more questions, we can talk about those. So I'm going to read these slides and feel free to read along with me. Value, light, dark, and in between. What is value in landscape painting? It is the lightness or darkness of objects or planes. This value is determined by the amount of light that can be observed on the different surfaces or planes in the scene. There are a few basic guidelines to help us think about this topic. The value of an object is influenced by how light is striking it from the light source. In landscapes, the light source is the sun. So let's think of it like this. No light can fall on different planes that does not originate from the sky. So even when a sky is dark and stormy, by necessity, the ground and the objects below must always be darker because they are beneath the source of light. This tells us something about the value relationships between the planes we must remember, and I'll go into this more in a bit. Value also has nothing to do with color. I created a slide here that demonstrates this. So in black and white, the value shows us that they are nearly the same value, but when you add color, the colors are very, very different from each other. That's kind of that was a hard concept for me to grasp and to understand, is just how dark to make things, or how can that bright blue be the same value as that green or that orange. And so that was a kind of one of those moments where things unlocked in my head. Down at the bottom of this slide, I'm continuing. If value has nothing to do with color, how does value work with color? Let's bring these concepts together. As you can see from the chart below, value has a scale that is commonly used to help us figure things out. One helpful thing we can do is to view an image in black and white. This will help us figure out how the value relationships between the elements this will help us figure out the value relationships between the elements we want to paint. Since we know the sky is always the lightest, and as we will learn, the trees are always the darkest, it's helpful to figure out the value relationships before you start painting. Above, you can see the combination of color and value. Now the two come together to give us the tools to bring dimension and weight to our painting. Darker values cause things to look heavy and vice versa. So I created this little cardboard cutout diagram to help us understand how different planes in a landscape catch light differently. It's called the theory of angles. How light influences different surface planes in a landscape is called the theory of angles because objects or planes present different angles to the light that falls upon them from the sky. They have different values and relate to each other like this. So the sky is the apparent arch, and that's considered one of the planes. It's always lightest in value. The angled planes are things like mountains or things that are at an angle to the sun, and they are going to be sort of this slanting plane, second stripe down on the right, this middle dark color or half dark value. And then upright planes are the trees or things that are completely perpendicular, and they will have the darkest value. And then the ground is the flat plane, and it will always be only darker than the sky, but lightest of the rest of the landscape planes. This is the painting you're going to see me paint. I did a bunch of time-lapse videos of this painting as I was creating it. And I've taken the liberty here of putting it into black and white so you can see how the painting on the right translates into value on the left. I don't use a lot of different values. You can see in this painting, there may be 3 or 4, but the sky is lighter than the ground here. The trees are darker than the mountains and the ground. Things in the foreground tend to be darker than things on the horizon. So the ground itself gets lighter as it moves away from us. And you can't see it here. We'll talk about how things turn blue in the distance as well. Aerial perspective, transitions in value and color. Every plane we described previously contains subtle variations of both color and value. For example, the many colors that exist on the leaves of a tree. As we've learned, a tree is an upright plane and will appear darkest in value in your painting. However, you can't paint a tree with the same green all over, or it will look flat and fake. As the light hits the tree, the subtle variations in color and minor changes in value give it life. Let's take a look at how to identify value and color when we aren't looking at gray tones. Also understand that any color, hue, or shade can be separated from its value or weight as seen below. So the first line across, we have the same color, but a different value of each. We have light, medium, and dark value of this green. The second line down, we can demonstrate that roughly the same value exists for these colors, but they're completely different colors. And then in the third line, we have different values and different colors. So I think the challenge for us is to, as we're painting, obviously in colors, to just figure out how dark or how light to make something, but understanding the way that light works with value and then being able to translate into color is a very helpful thing. Aerial perspective. Did I get my slides out of order? I am going the wrong way. Okay, sorry. Aerial perspective can be defined as the changes and gradations of color that are used to display distance and perspective in a painting. For example, all colors become cooler and lighter as they recede from the eye. White is the exception to this rule. Whites become warmer and darker as they recede. What are cool and warm colors? Cool colors have a great deal of blue in them. Pure blue is the coldest. Warm colors are made up of yellows, reds, and oranges. An important thing to remember is color that recedes outdoors is most greatly impacted because yellow fades out of a landscape first as it recedes from the foreground. Not only pure yellow, but also mixtures that contain yellow, such as brown, warm red, orange, etc. Green will range from yellow-green in the foreground to a cool green in the middle ground as the yellow diminishes. Then in the far distance, it'll turn into a faint greenish blue at the horizon. But what exactly causes this gradation to occur? Atmosphere. Why are those mountains misty blue? We typically think of atmosphere as the protective layer made of water vapor, gases, oxygen, etc. around our planet Earth that makes life possible. While this is true, we need to consider atmosphere in a different way. Our atmosphere is the receiver and diffuser of light and causes objects to appear lighter and bluer in the distance as we look through more of the atmosphere. Remember, we learned that yellow fades out. However, the sky is influenced differently than the land by atmosphere. As we look straight up above us, the sky will look the bluest overhead. As we look straight toward the horizon, the sky appears much lighter and yellower. Why? Because the sky is not a solid object, and when we are looking toward the horizon, light must travel through more atmosphere than when we are looking straight up. Here's an example. And this diagram came out of that book that I was referencing. The influence of atmosphere. The angled lines radiate from the observer's point in the diagram, below. So if you were standing here where all of these lines converge, you can see why I said that we would be looking through less atmosphere when we looked up and through more atmosphere toward the horizon. So if we're standing here looking up, we aren't looking through as many layers of atmosphere as if we're looking toward the horizon. The most obvious form of thick atmosphere would be fog. So I took a page protector and stuck it in front of my tree here to demonstrate thick atmosphere. Sky colors. Is the sky really blue? Based on the arch of the sky and what we just learned about the atmospheric influence on how we view the sky, we learned that there is a tremendous variation of the color of the sky. In order to paint it in a way that's pleasing to the eye and is more believable, we need to understand what happens to the various bands of the sky colors from zenith to the horizon. As you will recall, the sky appears bluest at the point straight above us and will appear more yellow toward the horizon. However, there's far more subtlety and gradation between the two than you might realize at first glance. Obviously, the most dramatic time to see these gradations is sunset. True violet blue very gradually becomes a true blue. Then as we travel down, this blue becomes a green blue that's lighter in value than the blue above it. From about 60 degrees down to the horizon, very gradually more yellowish green zone appears, then a smaller zone of orange yellow, then orange red, and at the horizon, a very narrow zone that becomes a thick, warm, rosy gray haze. Let me show you how I interpret this for most of my skies. So rather than using bright oranges and reds, I use muted, more pastel colors for my sky. At the top would be the demonstration of where your violet blue could be. And then I literally use a green, start blending it into the blue, and then blend more yellow and green together, still with some blue, and then come into the mixture of yellow and green, yellow and pink, which kind of turns slightly orange. And then if this were red, which the book talks about, this band would be like a brighter red color, and then the gray, rosy gray color at the bottom. Clouds, aren't they just white and gray? Clouds can be the most beautiful element in a landscape if they're done well. However, they're also tricky. There are some basics I will share, as well as how I've painted clouds in my recent paintings. However, painting clouds is something I will spend a lifetime trying to improve and experiment with. Remember, the appearance of clouds in the sky sets the mood for the entire painting. Imagine the arc of the sky as if it comes up over your head like a curved ceiling. Clouds at the horizon are the furthest away and therefore will appear the smallest. Stratus or sheet clouds range from about 2,000 to 7,000 feet. Large puffy cumulus clouds normally reside in the middle of the sky at an altitude of about 5 to 15,000 feet. Cirrus or mare's tail clouds usually occur between 20 and 40,000 feet. And then nimbus or rain clouds are the low-hanging, dark water-soaked storm clouds. So deciding on what the weather is in your landscape influences the sky you'll paint. You'll want to consider the time of day. Are the clouds pink with the sunrise or fiery orange of sunset? Are there any clouds at all or just a few floating along on a summer day? Those are all things to consider as you put your landscape together. The thing to remember about painting clouds is that they usually are darker than you think. They become darker and yellower as they get farther away. And because clouds diffuse and are greatly influenced by light, they often contain nearly all the colors of the rainbow in small and subtle ways. Most commonly, we see shades of blue, blue-gray, yellow, pink, red, violet. It all depends on the position of the sun in the sky and the influence of the weather. Most clouds have a bottom to them that will appear slightly darker and flatter than the rest of the clouds. The whitest whites are usually reserved for the bright silvery edges of clouds. I found that I prefer to paint more subtle, less defined clouds, and I'll show you more about that in the video I took as I painted this project. Composition. How do we catch and keep the attention of our viewer? I want to pause here because this is a lot to take in, and I understand that. Does anyone have any questions before I continue?
We actually do have two questions.
Okay.
Dr. Nana asks, are you good at seeing value with a naked eye? Is it a skill that you've developed over time?
It's something that you develop over time as you train your eye. I find myself driving around and looking at the way the light is playing on different planes, and I think, oh, how would I paint that? And so you do develop it over time, and it just takes repetition of concentrating on how to interpret it in the real world.
Hmm. And a follow-up question, how is it that the sky doesn't look green in your painting?
But I painted it with green paint. We'll talk about that.
Thank you.
It's,
Yeah.
again, it's about relationships, right? It's about
Mm.
the fact that it's lighter in value, even though it's not a true blue. There's a lot of green in it. It reads, our mind wants to tell us that it is blue. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Composition. How do we catch and keep the attention of our viewer? The grid. We commonly see, now there are many methods for creating a compositional structure, and I'm using the most basic, which is the grid. We commonly see the same grid on our cameras on our phones. It's usually divided into 3 squares high by 3 squares across. This is the simplest concept to apply when laying out a painting. There are many others that I won't go into here. The 4 intersections of these lines in the center of the canvas gives us an idea of where we might place objects of interest to draw the eye of our viewer. The horizontal lines of the page give us an approximate location for where we will likely wish to place our horizon line. Excuse me. Usually about 1/3 up from the bottom shows more sky, or 2/3 up from the bottom shows more land. What is interesting to us that we want to share with our viewer? We should ask ourselves questions like this. What are we wanting to share with our viewer? What do we want them to see? What feeling do we want to convey? Dark, moody, bright, peaceful? And how do we lead our viewer's eye into and around the painting to hold their attention? Let's take a look at my painting to see what I did well and what I didn't do so well. So you can see the grid is here. Can you guys see that faint white grid on top of the photo?
Yes, we can.
Okay. What do you notice in the painting? Where is the horizon? Anyone want to answer these questions? Where do you see the horizon at?
Lower one third, is it?
Lower one third, right? So that gives me
Mm,
more
yeah.
sky, right? Um, how does your eye travel into this scene? Do you want to take a guess?
From the closest plane to us towards the horizon.
Sure. So I used this path, this little path in the grass to draw us toward the area of interest, which is the trees. Um, now, if my area of interest would be where these lines intersect, right? You've got these four intersecting points that are natural places to put things of that you want your viewer to focus on or to catch their attention. What could I have done differently to have made this a little bit more interesting?
Added a bunny.
I missed the bunny. You're right, man. I could have put a bunny. I could have put him right here, and that would have been a perfect place for him. I would have liked to have moved one element in this scene. Can you guys guess what I'm thinking?
Would you place the trees on different levels? I don't know.
Yeah, I would have moved this bright orange tree slightly to the right so that it would have been, whoop, hello, I did it. I would have wanted to place it around here. But I wasn't thinking about my grid at this point when I started painting. Those are the kinds of things that I'm learning as I go.
Well, in this particular case, what you've done is you've framed with the trees the place where you want your viewer to go, which is that horizon, those mountains in the background. I don't see that as a mistake.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, it's not, but it just wasn't intentional. These are the things that I'm learning as I go along and that I'm doing instinctually, as Randy has said a few times, that work out okay, but I don't always know why I'm doing them. I can look back and think, oh, I could have done this differently. Um, so yeah, I just think it would have been a little bit more interesting though if I'd moved that tree a little farther to the right. Um, All right. And then a tip would be that you can use a grid like this to help transfer an image that isn't the same size as your canvas onto the desired canvas. So if you drew the same grid onto your canvas and you have it on your maybe a printed piece of paper or a computer screen that has the grid over the top, then it gives you a roadmap for drawing in or sketching in the elements that are in each of the squares to accurately scale the image to your project. Okay, my process. First, I need to figure out what I want to paint. I will look through images that I might have taken or found on Instagram and think about what elements I want to pull from each inspiration piece. A lot of time, I'm making up what I want to paint from my imagination, but that is by far one of the worst ways to get started. It's also one of the hardest. It's really helpful. You need to have a reference of some kind to look at while you're painting. Next, I would do a pencil sketch on paper to figure out well, I'll talk to you if your ideas are pleasing and if they're what you like. Then once I'm pretty happy with my sketch, I'll draw out a grid onto the canvas to help me figure out the placement of the horizon and lightly sketch in and transfer my basic drawing onto the canvas and make adjustment to certain elements that I want the viewer to be drawn to, even where I might want my clouds to appear. Then I'll ask myself, what time of day do I want it to be in my painting? Morning, sunset? And what's the overall feeling I want the painting to have? Am I trying to communicate a specific message? Is it dynamic with rich colors or soft and peaceful or moody and dark? What do I want the viewer of my painting to have their eye drawn to? What elements can I use to help the viewer's eye travel around inside my painting? That's kind of repetitive. In my case, I used a path. I used the bright tree with autumn colors, a tall tree, clumps of grasses. Then next, as I'm moving through my process, I'll tone the canvas with a color like burnt sienna for brighter painting or raw sienna for a softer painting. I do this by thinning paint and painting it on and then wiping off areas I know will be lighter, like clouds or reflections on water. Then I'll take a small 1/4 inch flat brush and lightly paint over my pencil drawing. Well, I think I might have reversed my process here. Sorry about that. Ideally, I would have toned my canvas first and then done my pencil sketch, because if I do it the way I've written it, I will have wiped off my pencil sketch. So anyway, then I will take a small brush and take the thinned paint, maybe a mixture of raw umber and raw sienna, that's still really thin and translucent, and use that small paintbrush to sort of sketch on my elements of my painting so that I can really kind of start getting a more solid picture of what the painting might look like. Boy, I really kind of messed that up, huh? I think I put this in twice, didn't I? The toning of the canvas. Sorry about that. Then next you'll begin the actual painting. I always work top to bottom and back to front. I start with the sky, painting down from the top to the horizon and doing some of the sky gradations while not going over the lighter areas that I know I want clouds to be in. Then next, I'll lightly paint in whatever element is on the horizon, usually mountains or hills. Then next, I begin the actual painting. Oh my word. Sorry, guys, I did this in a hurry. I always work top to bottom, front to back. We'll just repeat that. I was having spacing problems, and I copied some of these things over from one slide to the next and duplicated it. Okay, then next I will lightly paint in a few of the tiny clouds just above the horizon. Then I will begin working my way forward by lightly painting in the smaller trees in the distance, then the larger trees and shrubs in the midground. At this stage, go lightly because you'll continually make adjustments in color and value to get a harmonious look. Then I'll begin working on the foreground and midground planes, lightly painting in some of the grasses and textures, bushes, and foreground elements. And then I just keep adjusting colors and values of all the plants. And I go back and forth doing that until it looks right. And then I'll add some final color touches to the clouds in the sky for interest, and add some shadows under the trees and bushes, and then darken parts and highlight other parts in the foliage and the trees where the sun is shining directly down on them. And then the final thing is painting in the foreground, the details, the larger, closer bushes and grasses in the foreground. Actually, for me, one of the hardest things in a painting is the foreground, because I spend so much time and energy on what's going on in the back that when I get to the foreground, I don't always know how to pull it together and make it look realistic. So that has been a new struggle lately. I have a video here. It's a time lapse. It's just going to play, but we can talk through it and I can pause it. It begins with showing you how I mark with a white pencil on this. This is not a white canvas. This is a linen canvas. So I didn't do as much toning as I would have if it were a white canvas. If it was a white canvas, I would have completely covered it and then wiped off the burnt sienna or a tone color so that I got rid of all the white. But because this is a linen canvas, I didn't have to quite cover it like that. So this is my pencil sketch. And then I began putting in my grid. And as you can see, I have the grid completely done at this point. I promise it won't be so boring. Then I transferred it actually in a white pencil. Then I painted it over with some thinned burnt sienna and kept filling it in. Darkened some of the areas that I knew would be in shadow. These are some of the colors that I used to mix my sky color. So if you want me to go back to that, you can see I've got, this is a Titian green pale, I think is what the name of it is, a cerulean blue, and Payne's gray. And
Titan green pale.
Titan green, sorry, thank you. And this is what the color ended up looking like. So that looks pretty green to me. I used a sponge to wipe it on and did that in a couple of layers, going right over the trees because the tree has sky that shows behind it. Here I'm beginning to put some of the pink end down at the horizon line. And you'll see me keep mixing colors on my plate. I added a little yellow here, a little white, and you'll see me kind of custom blending that as I go up. It's very subtle. Added a tiny bit of the Payne's gray there to put the mountain colors in. Didn't like it, wiped it off. I do a lot of that, wiping it off and doing it again. Unpainting has become my superpower. That's where I am at that point. I'm going in with more of the pale yellow. Beginning to work on the clouds. So the clouds, I'm using a large brush and not using pure white. I'm actually starting with yellow, then adding the pinks, a little bit of pink and orange to it to give it some dimension. Here's where we're going to be getting in. Whoopsie. How in the world did I just do that? Sorry about that, guys. I shouldn't be trusted with technology. This is why I have people who do it for me at work. Okay, so this is where I start custom blending my colors for my greens. I don't typically use one color. I usually use a combination most often of Payne's gray, sap green, and raw umber. With those three colors and white, I can pretty much, I could, if I really wanted to, paint almost an entire landscape.
Arlene, we have a quick question.
Yeah.
What type of brushes are these? Do you use?
Yeah, I'll get to that. I actually have a whole page of my brushes at the end for you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And the same, I'll talk about the paints at the end as well. So you'll just, if you watch on the right side, I'll make them warmer by adding some burnt sienna into it. I'll make them cooler by adding the Payne's gray. I'll make them lighter with yellow, the pale yellow, and a little bit of white. White's not always the best way to lighten a color. It can really dull it, but sometimes you can use other colors to make them appear, make your colors lighter. If you noticed on the left, I added some more tree branches. I felt like I needed more open branches on that left side, kind of to show let the sky come through. I wasn't happy with the underpainting I did. I did too much of that red burnt sienna in the big tree, and I was fighting it because I wasn't getting the sky color coming through the way I wanted to. So, yeah, when you're painting, make sure you leave some air and light to come through your trees. So here I'm actually putting the branches in after I've already painted the tree. I'll take those gaps and holes and start putting the branches in a way that looks a little more natural than if I paint the branches and have to fit the foliage around them. And that's kind of a newer trick that saved me a lot of time. This is literally like watching paint dry, isn't it? And then I'm working again with the trees that are closer to the horizon. I'm adding things to the clouds. I'm using a lot of blending in the sky. And then I start working in the midground and the foreground a little bit, trying to emphasize those little shrubs. And then now I'm putting in the grasses with this, the texture with this fan brush. It's a very stiff bristled fan brush. That's where I was at that point in time. And then I'm putting in that feature tree. So it was trickier to find out how to get those bright colors to show over the green of the tree behind it versus over the blue of the sky. It was obviously much easier. So I had to keep playing with adding more yellow, trying to find ways to make the paint a little more opaque, and just mixing it. And then I made sure to bring some of that same color over onto the other side of my painting, because in nature, plants usually just don't exist by themselves. And I even brought some of the colors, the autumn colors, up into the green of the tree on the right, just to have it be more harmonious in a really subtle way. Often you can mix colors in that you don't visually recognize, but when you use them as your part of your blend, it helps everything to come together. Again, working on the grasses, coming in with some lighter color, trying to make the grass look more long. I didn't like that red underpainting that I was getting. I was fighting it in the front there too, so I was trying to mute that down and change it. I probably wouldn't have done my underpainting with burnt sienna, at least all the way into the foreground, because I definitely was struggling to get that to blend in. I guess I could have done any number of things differently, but this is how it worked out for me. It's really about a lot of patience and just keep working it until it looks right to you. And I'm coming back in with more highlights, trying to figure out how the light might have been shining on the trees, and if it was coming from the right side, where would it be shining on the foliage? Then I decided my little bushes needed to be greener, so I'm darkening them up and more in the foreground. Then I realized the foreground was empty again. This is where I struggle again with, like, what do I do? It looks naked. How do I pull it together? So I ended up adding, and you'll see it, a couple of clumps of bushes to give more interest in the foreground. Here I'm putting in individual grass strokes, which is something I do very patiently and by the thousand. And that's where I realized my foreground still needed some help. So I came in with some darker colors and added a few little clumps of bushes. I also, you can't really see it, but made sure that I bring the lighter grasses up over the edges of the green bushes so that they look integrated, and they don't just look, oopsie, I started it over again, didn't I? They don't just look isolated, like they're stuck on there, but in the area down here, you can kind of see, can I zoom? Oh, I can zoom. There you go. You can see how I brought the grasses up over the green of the little bushes there. And the mountains in the background, the little bushes that are paler and bluer, the little dashes of clouds. I don't know how well you can see them on screen, but just gives you a little bit more view of the detail. So next, I will show you some tips. One thing that I'm really particular about is making sure I keep my brushes clean. And so I know we had talked in our group, Juan and Nan had asked me how I clean my brushes. So I did this little video for them. I'll just play it for you here. So, yep, I have any acrylic on my brush. I will rinse it off, as best I can. Get my fingers in there, working it around, getting most of it out. And then what I typically do is go over to my bar of soap and kind of get it soapy. And then I move the soap. Sorry, I only have one hand here. And I scrub it along the ridges in the soap dish like this. Just kind of back and forth to gently work the residue of the paint out like that. And then I just rinse it. And I've had this brush now for, I don't know, 3 years, and I use it for a lot of things. So it's still basically brand new. I like the using the soap because the fat in the soap keeps the bristles from drying out too much. Now this is not natural bristle anyway, but if you have a natural bristle brush, it would help protect that too. So that's my demo. Nothing fancy about it. Bye. Oh, any comments up to this point before I keep going?
We do have a few actually.
Okay.
I think Nan was asking, wasn't your palette smaller 9 months ago? Is the broader palette how you managed to do these two paintings faster?
Palette.
The
You mean my
color palette.
canvas?
I
My
think the color
canvas.
palette.
No, the colors you used. I think
Mm.
when we
Oh,
started, we were
yeah.
using fewer colors.
I painted in a much different style with much more detail and much darker colors. And yeah, I think that simplifying the palette of colors did help a lot, but also just not trying to paint as much detail into every single little thing. I was overthinking it, and I was working very hard at every little leaf on the tree and every little piece of bark, to show the texture on the trunk, and every little blade of grass. I worked too hard, and all that detail really doesn't show unless you get, within 2 inches or, within a foot of the canvas. And I am just as satisfied with the end result, with the softer look. But yeah, that is what took me so long in it wasn't just the range of colors that I used, but really more the technique of what I was doing.
We also
Were
have
there-
two. Yeah, we actually have. Oh, we actually have two questions about the color on the painting as well, because you mentioned you may not have used burnt sienna. What other colors would you have used for the?
Would I have used?
Mm,
Uh, I would have used raw umber and oh, is it raw sienna? Yeah, raw sienna I could have used rather than something that was so red. I was thinking red was going to work for me because I knew I wanted to do an autumn, a fall leaf coloration, but um, I ended up fighting it because of that red tone that just wouldn't quite go away. So if I'd done it differently, to be darker in the foreground, I probably would have gone with a raw umber, maybe mixed with raw sienna.
thank you. And because you were talking about your 3-year-old brush, we're all really impressed. Nan was asking, what brand brush is this 3-year-old one? What brand do you use? What brand do you use for this brush?
For this one, one of my favorite brands that I stumbled on, and I'll go into this, is King Art brushes, and I get them on Amazon. They're very affordable, but they work really well for me.
And Juan wants to know, like, is it a glycerin soap that you use?
It's no, just any old bar soap, nothing special. Any kind that I have. It's just that bar soaps tend to be made have an element of fat in them. And that helps to break things down and helps to not dry out your bristles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So if you saw my first presentation, I talked a lot about how I had these, again, it was that dark blue, dark green, more intense painting. And I had two trees on the left side of it that I just didn't like. And I ended up removing those trees, which was, I think it took me about a week to remove them and repaint the background and patch the grasses where I had removed and basically destroyed my entire background of my canvas. So I had to reconstruct it and make it blend. And I just wanted to show you how I remove acrylic paint because it can be done. I did a little video here today for you, and it's pretty basic, but I'll just play it. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate for you the method that I use to remove acrylic paint from a canvas. This paint has been dry for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days. I'm going to splash a bit of rubbing alcohol into a little dish and put roughly the same amount of water into the dish. And then I'm going to use a bristle brush. This is a King Art 1/2 inch, kind of stiff bristle. Get it wet, and then just start working with what I want to remove. So let's say I want to remove this white patch. I think this might be gesso, so I'm not sure. And it's actually been on for months. We'll see how that comes off. If I were working on my finished piece, I wouldn't have allowed that much liquid to have gone on to the surrounding area. I would have dabbed some of that alcohol mixture off of the brush so it wasn't so wet. Just kind of saying that I see that would have been a problem on a real painting because it would have bled over into other areas I wouldn't have wanted it to. Ooh. Oh, heavens, Arlene. Okay. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate. No. I'm sorry, guys. Okay. I'm not sure. So what I will do is agitate it, keep working it off. Now you can see that the newer acrylic next to it is coming off a little easier. But I could just keep working this and I would get it off. You can see it lifting. So this is the opposite of painting. I call it unpainting. So you can see that that's lifting. It's also starting to take a little bit of the black paint in the background, but let me show you on this band of newer paint. How I could easily and pretty concisely remove what I want to remove. And in the first painting that I did for Symbiosis, that I spent maybe 150 to 180 hours painting, that's what I did to remove my trees and take them completely out of the picture. So acrylic paint is very durable. It tends to dry really quickly. And so if you have issues that you want to remove, this is the best way that I've found to do it. It's quite effective. Okay. Sorry if that was too much or too long.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect. On the same topic, we actually do have a question.
Sure.
Does it damage the surface when you do this process?
If I kept going at it, I would have started removing the black. You can see it's a little duller in the background of the image. You can kind of see that here. Can you see my cursor on the bottom right?
Yes, we can.
You kind of dulled it. So yeah, you would work if you keep going at it too aggressively, you will go all the way through through the gesso layer. And I just lost my slide. Hang on one second. Yeah, so you do need to be careful. And that's why it took me a week to remove those trees, because I was going really slowly and carefully to try to take off as little of the background as I was able, so I didn't damage it too much.
And
Any
another
other
was
questions about it?
there's another question. If you're working more in pastel, could you use a scrub daddy and pink stuff, or a or Mr. Clean sponge, or just add more impasto layers over the mistakes?
You can certainly cover things with gesso, but because I use thin layers of paint, I don't put a lot of paint on my canvas. I wanted to keep it fairly smooth, and I didn't want to start having ridges and bumps from adding a lot of gesso to try to fix things. So I preferred to remove the paint instead. I don't like using anything that's going to leave a residue behind, like a soap or a scrub daddy would be too aggressive. It would be really difficult to control exactly where you're scuffing the image that you're trying to remove. Like, you would probably do too much collateral damage, and you might leave scratch marks in the surface. Again, I'm trying to keep it smooth so that I feel like I have a new canvas when I go back to paint over it again. So I wouldn't do that. It might look like I'm working really hard to remove that paint, but I'm not pushing very hard on the brush at all. I'm letting the brush do the work just by just gently moving it back and forth, and then using the paper towel to pick up the excess and kind of clean it off and see what I've done.
I think your process really shows true because it's hardly noticeable the way you've removed it. So thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. It's also a great way to save a brush that you set aside and forgot about and came back, and it was stiff because the paint had dried in it. So you can do a similar process, just dip the dried brush with the old dried paint into your alcohol and water mixture and keep agitating it around and kind of taking it out onto, some paper towels and bending the bristles. And it won't be long before you're able to clean that brush up just like brand new. You don't have to throw it away. It's also a good way to help you remove dried paint from your palette. Yeah. All right. So books that I recommend. There are so many, and I am a book collector like Heather Held. I probably have maybe 8 books on the Hudson River School painters. This is just one of them, which is on the right side. A really well-known and kind of expensive book is Alla Prima by Richard Smid. There's a lot of awesome information in there. For a more serious painter, he talks about not just landscapes, but figure painting and faces and all kinds of other things in that. There's a lot to learn. This Mitchell Albala, I have another book of his. I couldn't quite find it, but this painter's landscape workbook is also really good. The book that I kept referencing that I got the most information out of, I have a lot of tabs in this book, a lot of pencil marks, was the Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. It wasn't hard to read, and I was able to grasp the concepts pretty well from what he was sharing. So if I've only picked one book on this page, other than for inspiration, my inspiration would be Knights of the Brush. But the technique painting book I would recommend, I got it on Amazon. It was like $13. It wasn't expensive, would be the Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. Then, my screen might be frozen. What's going on here? Okay, there we go. So here are all my brushes. Not all of them, but the ones that I work with a lot. Like I said here, use anything that works. Don't be afraid to buy inexpensive sets of brushes. That's how I stumbled upon some of my favorites. It wasn't until I kept reaching for the same brushes over and over again that I realized that they were nearly all by King Art brand. I also use their set of script liner brushes for grass strokes and fine work. Some sets are so cheap in this image that they don't even have brand names on them. And I bought all of them on Amazon, except for that wide brush on the right side. I think I got that at Hobby Lobby. It's a master's touch, but I created this slide so that you guys could screenshot it if you're interested in finding these specific brushes, and you can read the exact style that they are and manufacture. And that's why the tape is down here at the bottom of the brushes. But so here on the left are the bristle fan brushes that I used. I think that came in a set of maybe 4 or 5 from Amazon. And then these are some of the liner brushes that are the King Art. These round brushes I use a lot for leaves and foliage. They're kind of a stiff bristle. And so they leave individual, like little miniature leaves if you don't have too much paint on your brush. This filbert that you saw me scrubbing with is also one of my favorites for foliage. It has a smaller companion to it. I don't know. I think I might have left that one in Idaho by mistake. So I couldn't find that one. And then this set of 4 blender brushes by King Art are oval shaped, and I really like to use those. I'll apply, when I want soft applications, I'll use these smaller ones, and then when I want to blend things like my sky colors and I'm trying to do that gradation, I'll put the paint on and then blend it with a dry brush, either one of these larger round or oval style. And same with this set. I got all of these brushes on Amazon super cheap, like $10 maybe, but they don't even have a brand name on them. But they're soft and they're round and they're great for doing blending, for doing clouds, and for even putting on that first layer of paint for foliage and trees. This square brush is a Raphael. This is a silver bright brush, which just means it's a little stiffer, a little shorter, and holds more paint. This is my little 1/4-inch brush that I said I use for doing my initial underpainting. It's some junk thing I found at Michael's. I don't even know what it is. And then this is the brush that I put varnish on with a lot. It's by Master's Touch. I don't know if you can see it, but it's also called a wash brush. So those are the brushes that I use.
Arlene, there is a question. Are these
Yep.
brushes characteristic for acrylic painting specifically, or are they just range?
I don't know because I don't paint with oils. I don't think they're designed just for acrylics. Randy, you might know more about brushes than I do. I'm not a purist, so I'm very careful, but I will use some of my, I have a couple of natural bristle, maybe sable type of brushes that are intended for watercolor, and I will use them if I've got the right application for them with acrylic paint, but I'm careful with them and I clean them immediately. So I would assume that because these are all synthetic bristle, they're designed more for acrylic, but I don't see why you couldn't also use them for oils. Randy, do you have any comments about brushes?
No, not a ton. I mean, these all can be used for water-based. You just don't mix your water-based if you're using water-based paint, and you don't go back and forth with the same brush from oil paint to water-based paint. But all of the art stores, and it's very easy to find the brushes that oil painters use versus the brushes that acrylic painters use. So yeah, not a lot of help.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Any other questions about brushes?
Not about brushes, but
Okay.
it's actually more about mediums. Do you use
Okay.
mediums to slow the drying time? Because I
Oh,
think
well,
Bianca was saying that she works slowly, so acrylic
Yeah.
dries too fast.
right. Well, let's get to that. Here we go, the magic. Randy introduced this particular brand of acrylic paints to me, and I love them. I love the line of acrylic paints by Golden brand called Open. They're much slower drying than normal acrylic paints, so you have to work, you have a little bit of time to work with them, and you don't waste as much paint because it doesn't dry on the palette so fast. I can cover them up and keep them until the next day to continue painting. The only color I've not been able to find that is one of my favorites that I use in my sky is this Titan Mars Pale, which that's my pink. I can't find that in the Open brand, but these paints allow me to paint in methods similar to oil paints, but they dry so much faster than oils, which I don't know that I'd have the patience for. But you can add mediums to these to slow them down a little bit more, Bianca, if you really wanted to. When you add mediums, you're going to have a little bit more translucence introduced into the paint. So it's, you know, that can be desired, but if you want opacity, that's a little bit more challenging. You might have to build up a couple of layers. But I really do like these paints because they aren't the quick drying acrylics that a lot of people are used to. They're not chalky. They do have nice depth to them, and I would highly recommend. What I love about them too is you can thin them and use them a lot like watercolors. What's nice is that they don't move once they're dry. So that's kind of an advantage in some ways. I've had so many frustrations with watercolor when I have a great thing and then I'll come along and, you know, work another area and accidentally lift, and that just doesn't happen as easily with these paints.
Yeah, and just to add to that for Bianca, these actually were designed to dry slower for oil painters who wanted to get away from using turpentines and things like that. So there are also open thinners and open mediums that also will dry. They have a drying retarder in them. That's why they call them open. They stay open longer.
They're really awesome. I really love them. You can get this starter set, which is what I started with. They're smaller, like 1 ounce tubes, I think, or something. And you can find that whole set on Amazon. I think it's got 7 colors in it, plus the thinner. They're not super cheap, but I think it's $50 for the whole set. So it's not a terrible investment if you want to try them out to see if you like them. And a little goes a long way. I've purchased bigger tubes, but I think I could have gotten away a little longer with just my starter set. Okay. Some things to think about. So these are some of the things I've learned over the last year by trial and error that it would have been helpful if someone shared with me in the beginning, or maybe they were shared from Randy at some point in time, but I just wasn't in the right place to necessarily let them sink all the way in and put them into practice. So it's important to allow the eye to find places to rest in your painting, to give breathing room and open space. Another thing would be leave space between your clusters of leaves on a tree to allow the light to filter through and create sky holes in the branches. Don't paint solid blobs. And then look at the elements in your landscapes as shapes when you're doing your initial sketch. Is the tree or bush really just a triangle, a round shape, an oval? This will help make your initial sketch layout easier. I would recommend starting with less paint and lighter colors. You can always thicken and darken your images. Remember to use higher areas of contrast to draw the viewer's eye to an area. Light is powerful. And then continually adjust the painting as it develops. Is the tree in the front dark enough? Is the foreground too light? Is the sky the lightest value in the painting, as we learned? Do the trees in the middle and foreground need to be made any bluer or lighter? Ask yourself what doesn't look right and be willing to change it. Trust your gut. How do you know when you're done? My answer to that would be when you can't find anything else to fix that bugs you. You just keep working at it. And then I would really admonish you to learn just by playing how to mix your colors. It's such a powerful skill. You can play on paper and keep a chart of your experiments. Let's say I mixed Payne's gray with, sap green. What color does that equal if I have equal measures of both? And just kind of chart it out so you learn how to mix colors yourself. Because as you saw me going along in my painting process, I will just do that on the plate as I'm going. I don't pre-mix a bunch of paint in any one color. I just use little dabs and then blend them on the plate, kind of eyeball, do I think that's the right color for what my painting wants right now? And then just keep making adjustments between adding more of dark blue or adding more green until I quite get it right. And then in my painting, I'm just going kind of back and forth between dark and light, and making adjustments to bring that harmonious balance into the painting. And I think we've been asking questions, but if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Arlene. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, you've been
Your
asking.
guys' heads hurt after all that technical stuff. Sorry.
It's amazing how you break down, like, there are so many technical concerns behind every single brushstroke that layer up over and over. It's amazing how you brought us through the process. I wouldn't have guessed that it just looks luminous when you see it, but there's a lot of thought that goes behind. So thank you.
Yeah, it does. You don't just sit down with paint and go, everybody's not Bob Ross, right? Bob Ross could take his stuff and just blah, 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 blah. And oh, that's a tree. And oh, that's a bush. I can't paint that way.
I think most people can't. That's why.
Yeah. I had to show you the hard way to do it.
Does anyone have any other questions or any comments?
Amazing, Arlene. Such a great
Oh.
presentation. And I'm just
Thank you,
blown
Jen.
away by like your progress and your confidence and how you've grown as an acrylic artist. Just absolutely amazing. You should be so, so proud of yourself. I know we all are.
Thank you. You're such a great cheerleader. I appreciate you.
Arlene,
Yeah.
can we see another landscape of you? Do you have
Oh,
because
I don't know if I have
in
any.
our chat you put some landscape.
Let me see what I have on my computer that I can pull.
Beautiful landscape.
The ones that I share with you in WhatsApp, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know if I have them on my computer. They were just on my phone. I have an older one or two. But they've been on Instagram. You've probably seen them. This is one that I brought to Randy's the first in-person Focus on the Sacred retreat with Randy. Can you see that?
Yeah.
This was the second landscape I ever painted. And I painted it on paper, which is, I don't like painting on paper anymore now that I've gotten used to canvas. My favorite is actually linen canvas. But yeah, I was happy with this. You can see there's a lot of detail in it. But I'm sorry, Juan, I don't have all of the ones I said earlier.
Why don't you like to paint on paper?
It sucks the color out. Yeah, I find it's harder to get the depth and the colors for me. The ones I showed you earlier, I can try to get them onto my phone really quick.
Because the paper absorb the color or what?
Yeah, there's something about it. And even though I had put gesso behind one of them, I struggled. I'm not going to be able to do this easily. I struggled to get the colors to really come through the way that I wanted them to.
Okay.
But it can be done. It's just the texture of the paper can sometimes, if you get it too damp, it'll abrade and maybe start peeling if you're not careful, if you try to work it too much, things like that.
Okay. Mhm.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
There are a lot of beautiful comments, especially I think the latest one by Elna, that she came in and she really enjoyed it. She learned a lot as well. So yeah, I think all of us have picked up a lot of little tips you brought up over the years. And look, I was doing this while you're doing.
Oh my goodness, look at you. Wow.
I've never done landscape before, but I was just like making little notes about
Oh my
what you were
goodness,
saying.
that's incredible. Good for
Yeah.
you.
So even when you were sharing, like all the things you were talking about just came through because it's it's beautiful how you really thought about how to show people about the light values, things like that. I've never understood it before. So you broke
Yeah,
it down really
I hadn't
well.
either. So
Yeah,
I wanted to try to share some things that you guys could, fast track your process a little bit more than what I did. And so
that was
that
really
was helpful
helpful.
information. Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why I wrote it out. Like I said, you guys can go back and watch it and screenshot if you want to kind of capture some of that info.
I
Mhm.
take capture of all, so later I'm going to translate. Yes.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Arlene. So what we
Yeah.
can do, perhaps we can stop the recording and then we can carry on the conversation if you want to, okay?
Okay, sure.